All right, I'm pleased to be joined by Dan Lybbert and Mike Clemons of the Drive and Kick podcast. How's it going, guys?
It's good, man. I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, same here, bro. Appreciate you having us.
Yep, I'm definitely excited for this, especially with the season's over in college basketball. So pretty excited about next year. But I'll start with the championship game. Baylor dominates Gonzaga. How do you think they were able to do or win by so much?
Mike, go ahead first.
I thought from the beginning that the matchup with Baylor and Gonzaga, it was tough for Gonzaga just because Baylor's guards are so good. They have three guys that can defend you, but they all can shoot and create their own shot. And I felt that Gonzaga really only had one perimeter player that can do that. So I felt like if they got pressure on Gonzaga's guards and they couldn't get it into Timmy, they were going to struggle. And that's kind of what happened. And Baylor just made a lot of shots as well. So
Yeah, for me, kind of going into the game, I expected a blowout just because of how dominant Baylor looked against Houston. It felt and it looked like Baylor had the three best players on the floor at all times. It felt like Gonzaga's only advantage was Drew Timmy, but it was his high IQ. It wasn't necessarily the fact that he was going to beat them by scoring a lot of points. It was going to have to be by him making a lot of passes, making a lot of smart plays. And when they got him involved, yeah, he did his thing. But yeah, it was just really tough for the Zags to match up with those three guards that Baylor had.
Yeah, I was excited to watch the game. To be honest with you, I thought it'd be a really good game, especially with Gonzaga and Baylor being the two best teams in college basketball. But it was the complete opposite of what I thought, and they just did a great job of shutting down Drew Timmy, and Jalen Suggs got into foul trouble a little bit there, and then he wasn't very consistent, so that was huge. Um, why do you think Gonzaga? Why do you think Baylor was able to shut down Gonzaga? Or sorry, why were they able to shut down Drew Timmy?
Shut down Drew Timmy. It just seemed like both their bigs were just bigger and stronger than him. If I'm being honest, they were fronting him in the post, and they had the other big helping on the weak side, and then they had DaVon Mitchell switching everything up top to where the guards can't create absolutely anything because he's hounding anyone with the ball. So it wasn't only that they're taking away Timmy, but they're taking away the pass to even give Timmy an option to get the ball.
yeah, for me, I think it's ball pressure. Like if you watch the game, Drew Timmy had position plenty of times. There's times they switched and he had Mark Vital on him and he had the mismatch, but the pressure on the perimeter didn't allow him to make passes inside. And by the time he did get it, he's been forced out so far away from the block that he's no longer effective, right? His advantage is taken away. So I think it was the ball pressure more than anything for me, in my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Drew Timmy was shut down the whole game, and I think they did an excellent job of shutting him down, and I think that was the huge key. What player for Baylor impressed you guys the most?
uh, that championship game specifically, probably the whole tournament, it was DaVon Mitchell. It has to be. I mean, he dominated scoring wise. He had, I think, 22, 24 points, and then he completely shut down any of Gonzaga's playmaking. I mean, Jalen Suggs still managed to get 22 points, but it was very clear just watching. Like, you don't have to be a huge basketball connoisseur to realize that he was being extremely disruptive to all of Gonzaga's offense. And I wanted it to be Jared Butler because I felt like Jared Butler had the capability to be the best player on the floor. But Davion Mitchell definitely for the whole tournament was kind of the guy that Baylor turned to because Jared Butler was being so keyed on, being player of the year candidate. So that's what I felt.
For me, it was Davion too. I knew he was good, but his quickness on both ends of the floor was the difference. Because Jared Butler, I think, is just as skilled offensively, but his quickness allows him to create a little more separation and to be just a little bit better defender. But in the championship game, I thought Jared Butler, I thought he went to prove a point, and then Davion started to defer to him because he realized he was hot early. So I felt like it was Davion for most of the tournament, but in the championship, I really looked at Jared Butler and was like, okay, that's the Big 12 player of the year.
Speaking of Jared Butler, how well do you think he'll do in the next level?
Man, for me, it's tough because going into this game, I had a lot of conversations with a lot of people, and I was debating for Jared Butler that I think right now he's better than Jalen Suggs. That was my honest opinion. And I just think that he's more polished and more NBA ready. So as far as the NBA, Jalen Suggs is going to be a higher pick based on age and potential and all that. And I'm not saying that he won't be a better player, but I think DaVon Mitchell will most likely come in ready to contribute, but he'll probably be thrown in the G League for a while just because of his age and he's not that tall. He's not extremely athletic, but he can definitely come in and be like a Fred VanVleet type of guy for a team in 2 to 3 years. Is kind of the role that I see him in. Like that's his ceiling.
For me, it's tough, man, because he's like a combo guard. He's not really a true 1 or 2. He's kind of undersized to play the 2. Can he guard other 2s? But I think he has a high enough IQ and he can shoot the ball well enough that I agree he can be sort of like a Fred VanVleet. I'm curious to see how well he can create separation at the next level because he's not the quickest, but he gets his shot off quick. So I don't know if he can break the defense down. We'll see how he does more in pick and roll. It'll just be very interesting. But as far as Jalen Suggs, I think Jalen Suggs is going to be one of those players that gets to the league and is better in the league than he is in college because there's more spacing. He can be way more athletic and he'll get more dunks and more open shots. So I think he'll have a better NBA career than Jared Butler, personally.
Yeah, you just mentioned Jalen Suggs. Do you think he has a chance to be the number 1 overall pick for the upcoming draft this season?
Personally, no, but I think it also depends on fit. I feel like I'm glad to see that the NBA is moving a lot more towards drafting players that fit the actual team as opposed to just drafting the best available, which in some cases you have to if someone really slides to you later in the draft. But I really think it comes down to Jalen Green and Cade Cunningham for that number 1 spot, and then it's pretty clearly Evan Mobley. But I definitely think that Jalen Suggs is going to be top 5 or potentially even top 3, like especially after this run.
Yeah, I think it depends on who gets the pick. Like, I'm a big Cade Cunningham fan. I haven't seen Josh Green or Jalen Green a lot, even though he played well in the G League bubble. But I don't know, man. I think Suggs, I don't see him as a number 1 pick. It really depends who gets it. Like, if Minnesota gets the pick, they could pair him with Anthony Edwards and get rid of D'Lo. I think it depends on who gets it, right? Like, yeah, that's what I would say. If Houston gets the pick, I don't know if they take somebody like a Suggs. They'll probably get Cade or Jalen Green, right? So it just depends who gets the pick in my mind.
All right, now with the season over, Baylor, of course, is the champions. Do you think they have a good chance of repeating next year?
No. they're losing probably 3 or 4 of their top players, their top contributors this year. And just in college basketball, with how much turnover there is from year to year, it's so tough to repeat. I mean, I don't even know when the last time we saw a repeat was, but like I can't even think of a team making back-to-back championships, to be honest. It's just with the turnover, you got to take into account the turnover that they're going to have and the turnover that everyone else is going to have. It's going to be really tough. I think that Baylor's definitely putting themselves in that category of consistent men's basketball powerhouse, but I'm not sure that anyone can really repeat in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I agree with what Dan said. I think just the turnover rate of each team and then the transfer portal team. Guys had good seasons on great teams and they're still leaving in the transfer portal. And this is a year where it didn't count for eligibility. And I think it's just so hard to repeat in college with what the draft process looks like now. And yeah, it'll be hard for them to just come in and win again, especially with only 2 or 3 main returners. It'll be tough.
Do you think Gonzaga has a better chance of repeating? Because I think they were number 1 in the way too early rankings or something like that. Where do you think they go next year?
I think they stay very competitive. Being in the West Coast Conference, they'll probably very easily win that again. But losing Jalen Suggs is obviously extremely key. I think Jalen Suggs is that piece that really pushed them to be legit in the tournament for the first time in a long time, because I can't remember, besides this year, a time where I didn't think like, oh, Gonzaga's going to choke. They're always a number 1 through 3 seed, and they always kind of choke in one of those early rounds. So losing Jalen Suggs is really tough because now I'm not sure who they go to close. Kispert was a senior. Timmy obviously is the guy they're going to run through if he doesn't declare, but he probably will declare just based on the fact that his draft stock is probably the highest now that it'll ever be. So it's just kind of tough. They obviously are very good recruiters and they put very good teams together, but I'm not sure that I can say that they'll be back, but they'll definitely be a very highly ranked team again.
Yeah, Dan couldn't have said it any better. They play in the West Coast Conference, and that's one of the reasons I think I don't expect them to choke, but I just don't know if they can win the big one. Like talking about the last team to go to back-to-back championships, it was Carolina when we beat Gonzaga the second year coming back. But it's like I just don't trust Gonzaga ever, and I think it depends on their guard play. They got Jalen Suggs, who was their highest-rated recruit. If they can't get another high-level guard like that, I just can't expect them to win.
Yeah.
I was actually wondering this. In the Final Four, Gonzaga defeats UCLA, probably one of the greatest games in college basketball ever. Do you think that shot that Jalen Suggs made was the greatest college basketball shot ever?
Oh my goodness. I'm trying to think of other ones right now because like it's a great shot. Don't get me wrong, but I'm not sure that it's the greatest. Honestly, to me, the greatest shot I've ever seen in college basketball, it was that Villanova Carolina game, but not even the game winner. The shot before that Marcus Page hit. Oh my goodness, he double clutched a three. He had like his legs completely spread out. He was up like 30 inches in the air, and he drained that. That's probably the greatest basketball shot I've ever seen, especially with the high pressure. But I mean, there's so many good buzzer beaters to think of. I mean, the Jordan Poole game winner like a few years ago for Michigan comes to mind. But yes, this one's definitely up there, just like with the moment and the actual shot.
Yeah, it's definitely up there, but I still think of shots, even though I hate Duke. Christian Laettner, the turnaround on the full court pass is probably one of the harder ones just because you just don't see that. When you really watch that last play of the game, and me and my roommate were talking about it, UCLA made the bucket, and all three guys sprinted down court with their back to the ball, and Jalen Suggs ran right up their back and got a wide open look. Like you know what I'm saying? So for me, I didn't expect it to go in, but it was a good look, right?
Yeah.
And there's no fans in there. I mean, it was a great shot, but I don't know if it's the top.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, to be honest with you. I mean, there's been a lot of good shots in college basketball. I think the Chris Jenkins shot was pretty awesome. The Marcus Page shot, no one really talks about that because they ended up losing. Christian Laettner, I mean, there's a lot of shots. You have to kind of really research that. Baylor, of course, has won the championship. Most of the time, people think of Baylor as a women's basketball school. With them now winning, do you think more people will consider them a men's or a women's, or kind of just the same still?
I mean, to me, I kind of look at them as just a sports powerhouse because, I mean, for the longest time, Baylor has been really good at football too. And the fact that now they're getting good at men's basketball as well as already being good at women's basketball, I think that's huge for them. That's super cool to always see a school. Like the other school I can think of that's like that is Oregon, really, that really has good sports all around. I mean, as I said, they'll have something to prove, and it starts next year. But I definitely would already after this year think of them as a good basketball school. I'm not sure that I think of them as a blue blood quite yet, but they're definitely in that maybe second or third tier of like elite college basketball programs right now.
Yeah, I've considered them elite for a while. They've had a lot of talented groups, but I don't know if you know about Baylor. Until about 2-3 years ago, they were playing that 1-3-1 all game, right? They just switched over to that modern space and pace, shoot a lot of threes. So I think that helps a lot. But a school like that always has talent, man. They have draft picks pretty much every year. So I think they've always been elite, but I think winning the big one kind of takes them to that, the next level up, and people are kind of say like, okay, I want to go to Baylor.
Scott Drew, the coach at Baylor, he's been there since 2003. Originally, a lot of people weren't sure why he took the job. Now that he's got a championship, do you think he's now considered an elite coach, like top 5 or top 10?
Go ahead, Mike.
Top 5 is tough just because you still got like Mike Krzyzewski, Tony Bennett, what's the name for Villanova, Calipari. Like it's tough to call him top 5, maybe top 10, top 15, but I definitely think he kind of solidified himself as like a really, really good coach. Like he was good, but the way they won the first time winning the Big 12 in like 70 years, they were really good last year, but COVID cut the season. So I think he's kind of like, he's definitely made a leap, but it's hard to say like top 5 or 10.
Yeah, I agree. He's definitely made a huge jump, but the thing is too, to the a lot of casual basketball fans are gonna continue to rank bigger names above him. Like, yeah, Baylor is a big name, but like Mike said, there's still other big name coaches that you think of who may not even be as good at the X's and O's as he is, but like Calipari, great recruiter, Krzyzewski, great coach, like the guy at Virginia, Sean Miller. You know, there's big name coaches everywhere that maybe aren't as notorious or actually as good when it comes to the nitty gritty, but they have bigger names and bigger reputations so far. So maybe he just needs to have a little more continuity to actually get into that top 5, top 10.
All right, before we end the interview, and this has been a great conversation. I love talking college basketball, especially with guys who, talk about it for a podcast. Can you discuss more about your podcast and, just for the people that don't know much about it?
Yeah. So, I guess in quarantine, we just kind of came up with the idea that we wanted to have a podcast. It was more Mike's baby, and he just kind of wanted to have me along for the ride, be a little sports or a co-host. And we're just trying to put out stories of the unsung heroes, like the non 5-star recruits, the unconventional guys that are still finding their way to be successful in their basketball journey as athletes or as whatever that they can be, but like has some kind of basketball background is kind of what we focused on so far. And we're just trying to give notoriety to everyone, because most podcasts you listen to are NBA guys, which is fine. Those guys are the famous guys, but all their stories are the same as far as, I was a McDonald's All-American. I was very highly recruited. I ended up at this big name school. Meanwhile, me and Mike both played college basketball in Canada, where it's not as very well known of a route, but it still is able to get people to the professional ranks that they want through hard work. It's just a very different route, but it still works. So we're just trying to bring attention to both that and just, low major D1 guys, D2, D3 guys, just anyone that we think their story has value to us and to the public, because everyone can learn something from anyone else. So that's kind of been our goal through this, and it's been very rewarding in my opinion. The networking that we've been able to make has been second to none, and just, I love it because it's something that we built from the ground up. We didn't really get any help. We're just kind of figuring it out as we go. And it's just been, as I said, our goal was never to really blow up or to make a bunch of money, but it's been something that we've been able to get a lot out of personally without the actual huge amount of listeners or like making any kind of money or anything like that. It's just been very rewarding for both of us. It's kind of what I'd say.
Yeah, man, just to piggyback on what Dan said, for me, it's about education. Like anytime I can learn from somebody, I know anybody else who's kind of in a similar scenario or who even likes basketball, they can learn. So for me, it's like a lot of people we interview are people that were directly around me that I may not know their story, or I may not actually have had that conversation. And if you really think about it, everybody wants to tell their story, right? So it's just providing a platform for people to come on and tell their story, but also educate us and educate the listeners, right? And it's not just about basketball. There's a lot of little life lessons that are tied into the stuff that people say. And I think that's the most rewarding piece for me. Like all the other stuff falls into place, and it has been, and we've been evolving. But for me, it's just conversation about real basketball. Like Dan said, there's only those guys in the league have a certain route, right? Once you're in that higher basketball circle, it's kind of like you're in there for life. But everyone else who is not in that circle, they have a story too. So that's all we're trying to do, is provide a platform for them to tell their story, for us to learn, and for anybody else listening to learn.
All right. Thanks for joining us, guys. And don't forget to check out the Drive and Kick podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. All right. Thanks, guys, for joining, and have a wonderful day.
You too, bro.
Man,
Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Sports Town Podcast, or the STP Pod for short. If you want to check out more videos of the Sports Town Podcast, click on the left. If you want to subscribe to the channel, click on the right.